I'm Tanner Olson, and this is episode 7 of Walk a Little Slower, a podcast where I share a little hope, a little love, and a little bit of what I've been learning. This is a podcast where you are invited to slow down, to lean in, to hold fast, and to eventually keep going. Welcome. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to say thank you for listening to this podcast. When I decided to start this podcast, I just wanted to offer a space to share some of the things that I was writing and learning. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends in your online community. Now, if you haven't left a review yet, please do. According to all the podcasts that I listen to, leaving a 5-star review really helps. And they also say don't beg for reviews. So this isn't me begging. This is just me saying, hey, I think it'd be really neat if you left a review for wherever you're listening to this episode. Here is a review from Sally Pally Fitness. She said on Apple Podcasts, she says this: the perfect podcast to listen to in the morning to prepare you for a great day. Can't wait for more episodes. Well, thank you for that, Sally Pally Fitness. I don't know if you caught that, but she did say that you are now listening to the perfect podcast. Anyways, feel free to help this podcast out. Anyways, enough of that. Stick around for the very end of today's episode. We have a listener who is sharing a poem with us. If you would like to share a poem on the Walk a Little Slower podcast, send me an email at writtentospeak@gmail.com, and I'd love to find a way to get your words on this podcast. So, with all of that, here is episode 7 of Walk a Little Slower. Most of my prayers begin with a deep breath, like when the doctor puts the cold end of the stethoscope on your back and asks you to take a deep breath as he listens to what's happening inside. Maybe this is my way of inviting God to take a look at what's happening inside of me. Sometimes when I pray, I'll close my eyes, and on most occasions, I'll even fold my hands. I'm not as religious about this as I was when I was 5, but it still slows me down to concentrate on the words I am saying and who I am speaking to. But no matter what, I almost always begin my prayers with a deep breath. Lately, I've been asking God to open my eyes to see what is around me. I guess what I am asking is for God to pull me forward just far enough to see what is happening that I cannot. A glimpse of the unknown, or of what I am somehow blind to. Ever so slowly, I'm beginning to see that it is joy. Joy has always been right in front of me. Some days I have to squint to see it. Other days I have to ask for someone to bring it in front of my view, but it's there. It's there, and He has put it there. The noise of the world and my past mistakes and the unshakable unknown tries to get me to believe it isn't. But it is. Joy is there. This episode is a hot take of sorts. And a hot take is, well, it's a response with the primary purpose of attracting attention. And I'm not looking for attention. I mean, a little. This is a podcast. But I'm not here to fight. But I do think we need to address something. Now, I don't think of myself as a controversial person. I certainly do not like conflict. I probably won't tell you that you're wrong. I'll think it, but I often won't say it. I usually stand up and speak up and go out on a ledge for what I know to be true. And this happens to be things like God and NBA basketball and how wonderful dogs and coffee and breakfast foods are. But recently, I've been irked by the phrase, choose joy, if you can believe it. These two words have rubbed me the wrong way for the past few years, and for a while, I couldn't understand why. There was a time when I didn't think much of them. Maybe I even agreed with them. I have probably posted a few poems with the hashtag #ChooseJoy, or quietly reminded myself to choose joy while frustrated or sad or lost in a season of uncertainty. I see these words everywhere I go. I've seen this phrase on sweatshirts, bumper stickers, social media posts, and even as the title of a sermon series. Now, before I go any further, I think it's important I state that this writing, this podcast, is not an attack on those who say or write or wear these words. Perhaps these words serve as a helpful and healthy reminder, or maybe they meet your cynicism with a better alternative. Perhaps we are even saying the same thing, just with different words. However, I've started to see that if a phrase like this bothers me, maybe it bothers someone else too. But I think there's power in words, and it's worth examining the ways that we use them. And so here I am, writing and talking about this. A verse that has always stuck out to me is 1 Thessalonians 5, which says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." I have loved this verse for many years. It centers my thoughts and invites me to rest in the overwhelming kindness of God's goodness. Yet, for a long time, I thought to rejoice always meant I always had to be joyful. As I thought about this verse the other day, I wondered if Jesus was always joyful. I can't imagine he was while on the cross or while mourning the death of Lazarus. I know I am not always rejoicing or joyful. Death, traffic, taxes, spilt coffee, and brokenness do not often invite or remind me to rejoice. Something has become clear to me, that we as humans are quite beautiful, and we're also quite complex. We are as complicated as we are simple, as intricate as we are boring. We are constantly being pulled in different directions as we experience the world and become who God created us to be. And when I read through the stories of the Bible, I can see how this Thessalonians verse is reflected in characters throughout Scripture. I see how David wrestled with issue after issue, and yet he rejoiced in the goodness of God, even while he was crying out in pain, struggling with depression and aching for change. I see how the disciples were all over the place. And again, we see how Jesus himself wept and mourned. I guess what I keep coming back to is that we can feel more than one emotion at once. And for years, I thought I could either feel only this or feel only that. I could be happy or sad, overwhelmed or free, hurt or whole, peaceful or chaotic, joyful or depressed. I didn't think that I could be both, but I can. And often I do feel more than one thing at a time. That we can hold joy and sorrow at the same time. Today, I am holding the joy of freedom in Jesus while feeling sorrow for the brokenness in the world. And we can hold the hope of forever in the pain of today. We can rejoice while being sad. Holding two emotions at once is some of the heaviest lifting we do. And I have to believe, as a follower of Jesus and a lost human being who has been found by grace, that joy is in every situation, but it is not always the leading character. To me, the words "choose joy" don't capture all of that. Personally, they're not going to become my mantra or tumble out of my mouth when a friend asks for advice or support. You won't see the words "choose joy" on a t-shirt in my online store. In all honesty, to me, choose joy sounds a lot like rub some dirt on it. When it comes down to it, the words "choose joy," I don't know if they're very thoughtful. And I'm not sure they're biblical. Someone once shared with me that the theme for their life is no bad days. And I asked them, how's that working for you? The words "choose joy" aren't working for me. Maybe that's why I'm writing about this. How do these two words come across to the one who is mourning? The individual who desperately wants to be married, the healthcare worker exhausted from the pandemic or another shift that went too long, or just those who are tired from the pandemic. The child who comes home crying, the couple who can't get pregnant, the parent who has to bury their child or spouse or pet. The family who is saying goodbye to a community they love, the one who is depressed or anxious, to the one who is at their end. I believe, like hope, joy is beautiful and unending. And it's hard to define, but you know it when you see it or feel it or know that it's holding on to you. I guess joy has hands. I have to believe joy It makes room for other emotions. Joy gives space to sadness and fear and longing and depression. Joy invites melancholy. It invites frustration and grief and uncertainty to the table. Joy doesn't need the spotlight or a microphone, because joy is not a cheerleader or a judge or influencer. If anything, joy is like a grandmother who has seen and hurt and loved and endured and celebrated and grown. A grandmother who has been more than who she is today for more people than she can count, but she's there. She's present and she's willing, just like Jesus, and the joy that he gives to us, present and willing. I was at the airport the other day, and a girl across the aisle had on a sweatshirt that said, "Choose joy." And I wanted to ask her about it, but again, conflict. And also talking to strangers at the airport, really not my thing. Maybe what I wish her sweatshirt said was, "There's joy in this." Instead of telling me to choose joy, remind me that joy has already shown up. Remind me that joy has chosen me. Remind me how Jesus never said choose joy, but he did say, "Come to me." An invitation to be with the one who gives joy, but doesn't force it on you. You do not always have to choose joy. Joy has chosen you. I'd like to close with something I wrote while waiting for my car to be fixed. Talk about choosing joy. It's hard to choose joy when the word thousand is used when telling you the price. I wrote this. When you find yourself back in a season of waiting or grief or sadness or fear, let you see where this is going. May you find the strength to remind yourself of the truth that waits with you. Let it be quiet or let it be loud, but let the truth be with you. May you remember our confession and pain and fear is met with an open tomb and a risen King. May you remember hope knows no boundary and grace has never skipped a beat or a day or a season. As the days continue to come and go, may you see joy is waiting with you. It is soft and certain and not like you thought it would be, but it's there. Joy is in the waiting, and you don't have to choose joy. Joy has chosen you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Walk a Little Slower. Before you go, make sure to subscribe, or like I said at the beginning, you're welcome to leave a review. This is not me begging, just kind of an invitation. But if you have a question that you would like to submit, you can send it to writtentospeak@gmail.com or over on Instagram. I try to respond to every email and message that I receive, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining me for this episode. As always, you can find me online at writtentospeak on Instagram or at writtentospeak.com. And if you would like to support this podcast and my ministry, you can visit patreon.com/writtentospeak to become a patron. Your monthly donation, it allows me to spread hope and announce love through written and spoken word, just like this podcast. Anyways, to close out this episode, here is a poem by London Rain. I hope you enjoy it. Have a great week.
Hi, my name is London Rain. I'm a poet, music producer, and photographer out of Orlando, Florida. My poetry book is out now through 3 Owls Publishing. It is called Smokescreen. You can get it on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or my website, londonrain.com, and that's LONDYNRAYNE. The best place to follow me is my Instagram, at London Rain, or Spotify and YouTube for my spoken word and music projects, which you can find those links through my Instagram. I'm going to read a poem out of my book. It is inspired by Romans 1:20, and it is called Electric Blue. Dusk, panoramic view, ominous clouds eclipsing the electric blue, striking lightning, reflecting you. The sky was on fire, trembling like thunder, a disciple of the electronic choir. Neon army glowing in peace, stillness, surrounded by chaos and electricity. City lights captured in slow shutter speed, every hair raised, electrocuted with praise. Since the creation of time, creator, divine, I, in seeking, am without excuse.